Great, thank you. I see I'm listed as a former great, so I guess I'm a good now. Super excited to be here, though.
That's kind of generous. So.
That might be generous, exactly. Look, we're going to talk about sustainability today, and in the conversations that we've had, it's extraordinarily interesting to hear the perspectives. Every school is different, every situation is different, but the hurdles are real, and you guys know this so well, but there are paths through them, and that's what we're going to be trying to speak about the most today. So I'll just introduce the panel, and we're going to try to have questions at the end if there's time. Just depends on how much Alex speaks about himself. So we'll start with Alicia Berg, AVP, Campus and Planning and Sustainability for the University of Chicago. To my left, we have Alex Kohnen, VP Facilities and Development Management, Arizona State University. I think everybody probably knows him. I see him here the last few years. And Dan Okoli, Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer of UC Merced. I really appreciate it. We've had fantastic discussions, and it can get deep pretty quickly, but everybody's at a different space here, so we will try to leave those questions to the end. So let's hop right into it and really encourage you guys to think about challenging some of the assumptions we have. And from that, I mentioned I'm a vendor. We're going to talk about all the negatives, all the climate change things you hear about, a couple success stories here, but from a vendor, I'm always thinking, well, why isn't this happening quicker? Why aren't you, everything from changing your light bulbs to looking at your electrical systems and all of this, huge layers in decision-making process. Let's start with that. That's something that's eye-opening to somebody who's not initiated or can try to get a big one through. I'll just start with you, Alicia. Is there any insight that you could give to just the complex layers that may be helpful to the room here on how you in Chicago have to deal with just getting a yes?
We have, an annual capital process. We have to, pitch the return per greenhouse gas reduction, or the simple payback on energy savings. There's a lot of deepness with that whole process with the budget office and the provost's office. Then you're competing, of course, with lots of other, the library books and all that other kind of stuff. So there's a lot of competition. So I think that kind of what Lander and her group were talking about, the planning is really critical. So, we set a goal of a 50% reduction by 2030 on an absolute basis. And then the next thing we did is we actually did a plan for how we were going to actually implement that. And the key to so far, the success of getting that through, is we made sure that we presented that plan to the president and the provost and got their support. So now, as it's going through all those competing procedures, we can keep saying, no, but the president wanted this. The president specifically said, I choose that pathway with this amount of capital investment. Yeah. So you have to figure out a way to make it happen.
That's well said. Anything to add to that, Alex? You've done it.
Yeah, I think that, one of the challenges, we at ASU have decided that sustainability is our identity. And that's an important aspect of all this. I think Pete talked about this morning about $1.5 million in meters. What savings do I get for that? You don't. Sustainability is expensive, and it doesn't have a payback. It has to have intangible benefits. But even if we were to do everything right now today, we bankrupt the endowment, let's go do everything today, the industry can't handle it. They could not possibly handle us dropping everything in the middle of their lap and say, okay, I want to completely electrify ASU. I want to plug it into the grid, and by the way, I want everything to be green electrons. And the industry would be like, what the heck are you trying to do to me right now? So I think we're taking a deliberate approach. In the same time, every institution has objectives that they've got to meet, and the pie's only so big. We benchmark our out-of-state tuition against California in-state because we want kids from California to come over and pay. Well, if I were to put a $450 million facility bill on everybody to electrify campus, tuition has to go up. There's no option around that. So we have to do it all in very measured strokes out here. And two big roadblocks in our way are, what is industry capable of support, and what is the institution willing to risk? And balancing those two things is not an easy thing to do.
Assuming that the utilities wave a wand and say, we've got it, we've got this, all the electrons you need, is that decision-making process, though, does that hold you up more than the reality on the ground? Is it like, I have to go through so many layers of...
No, I think one of the biggest challenges, and we have a roadmap, and we'll talk more about that, but even if I wanted to inject it in, swing space is another option that we have to do. We could balance probably 17 buildings a year. We have 289. We can't shut everything down to electrify. We have to take a very deliberate process to it, irregardless of industry, on top of everything, and we can't affect the operations. At the end of the day, if we're not educating students, sustainability doesn't matter anymore. So we have that competing interest also.
Dan, any perspective you can offer?
Just that it's always a yes for us because it's our brand, provided that we can balance the investment with the other things that we have to do. So there's only a certain amount of money or a certain size to the pie. And so you take from here, but you have to deduct from the other place. So we're constantly looking at weighing those kinds of things. But if it's from a perspective of a brand new building, we know that it's going to be electrified because it's one of the things that will keep us on the path to decarbonization.
For all of you, how often do you enact a sustainability measure and you actually are saving? We talk about it all the time, and throwing a light bulb out there or whatever it is. There are projects, distinct projects that can, but I think they're probably in the minority. But I'll let you address that. Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to pass. I'm going to think about that one.
Yeah, like most institutions, we have a revolving fund, and we have to have an ROI, and we have to be able to generate that. And I think 98% of those projects are electrical projects. And one of the biggest challenges we have, welcome to the Southwest, we don't have any water, and we can't do a water project on an ROI, but we've got to do something about water, and it's an incredibly difficult conversation to have. I probably have the cheapest water in America, and I live in Phoenix. It's $7 a blended rate K-gallon. Anybody pay more than $7 blended on a K-gallon right around here? Yeah, I didn't think so. Think about that. And nobody wants to address the issue because it's regressive to raise water rates right now. And I don't know if you've been paying attention. Arizona politics are a little weird right now. So we've got that. So when we talk about these ROI projects, yeah, I can do it on electrons sometimes, though I only pay 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Most of our electrons generated sustainably in Arizona get sent to California, where they're paying 24 cents. We love selling it to them on it, but we can squeeze a lot of those in. But I think more than half of our sustainability projects are duds. It's got to be a marketing issue. It really does.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know for sure that the solar projects pay for themselves because we have 5.2 megawatts of solar, and we're thinking of expanding because we see how much we pay PG&E,
Sure.
and then how much our rates are from our solar, and we realize that it is beneficial for us to do that. So nobody pushes against doing more of those on campus. As a matter of fact, our chancellor said to me, how about we do a bunch of solars on this campus and we sell it back? Well, of course, we can sell back to PG&E, but we can reduce the amount that we buy from.
Which is an individual kind of customized solution, right? It's not going to work in Chicago. And sorry, I cut you off earlier, though. Did you?
No, well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think, we've kind of done all the low-hanging fruit that had the really quick payback. So, the lighting projects and all that stuff that probably everybody's done. And that was where it was easy. So we're at the point now where it's getting a lot harder.
And that's a great point. Talk to me about timing, because end of useful life, okay, now it's time to take that boiler and go to the next generation rather than incremental savings. We're going to do something very different here, which is where planning comes in. How do you look at that? Do you say, look, we have this 10-year plan and we're going to be 40% less, or is it just when that thing goes, we know we're just going to put something more efficient in?
Well, you kind of have to do both, I think, because there's going to always be, well, certainly on a older campus like the University of Chicago, there's a lot more investment need than there is money.
Yep.
But you kind of have to do both. So if you wait till the system the risk can't be mitigated through just regular maintenance, and then you replace it with something more efficient. But at the same time, we're trying to leapfrog past that, and that's really what the energy conservation measures that are capital projects now that are in this roadmap that we were talking about for our energy reduction is going to have to come into play.
Yeah. Daniel, any comment on that?
Well, I think we're a fairly new campus and a baby campus, in the scheme of higher education, less than 20 years old. And so a lot of the things that were installed were efficient when they were installed. So we're looking at it end of useful life. And so we still have some gas boilers and so on that we're not going to just, pluck out. But when we need to replace those, we're thinking electrification.
But I think you kind of hit a nice nail on the head here, and I'm not telling this group anything they don't already know. You've got to focus on the primary objective is, quote unquote, to fix the maintenance issue, and then you talk about the premium after the fact. That's what's worked for us is, okay, we want to decarbonize and we want to electrify campus. A third of the steam that gets produced on campus never gets delivered because of leaks, because we haven't recapitalized our steam system. Sound familiar, anyone? And so we got to fix the system. Okay, that's what it cost. But now we're going to go to mid-temp hot water. Here's the premium on top of it. So I'm not having a $450 million argument with the administration. I'm having a $125 million argument with the administration. That's a lot more palatable, especially if you can phase it out over the 10-year span. So you're taking on a debt at 50, a peak of 68, a low of 22, and you're phasing it in increments over there. Arizona State can swallow that pill. They cannot swallow a $450 million pill all at once, but we can swallow that medicine. It's kind of like chemotherapy, right? You got to get just enough poison in the system to kill the disease, but you can't kill the organism itself, and we've got to manage it that way.
No, that's interesting. Speak to me about motivation. Everybody says, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10. We have to have that. Is that driven by the new generations coming in? Is it a mandate from up top and climate goals that we have to have? Is it a competitive thing where if I'm more sustainable than your campus, then people want to come to me? Where is it? I mean, you have 30, many, many decades cycles. So you have a lot more to play with than the, I guess, private markets, you'd say, right? You're not flipping these buildings necessarily. So talk to me about motivation. Where's that come from your university?
Well, I'd say for us, it's a combination of things. We had a carbon intensity goal that wasn't very ambitious. The students really pushed us. We made a more ambitious goal. Got a new president who was more committed to sustainability. I think that makes a huge difference. Leadership always does. But from the team and all, it's really just driven by the science and the need of climate change. So I think it's a combination of things. I don't think, unfortunately, competition really. Maybe it's an attitude thing that the University of Chicago has or something. I don't know, but I don't think that really seems to be the influencer. We do things our way. We're not into greenwashing. Many schools have much more ambitious goals than we do. I wish that we were at a 20-year-old campus. Oh my God, I'm so jealous. But we have a steam plant that was converted as gas powered, but it was converted from coal in the 70s. So darn, we don't get to count that towards our goal or anything because that was so ancient history. But
Alex?
I think the advantage we have. I mean, when I think of University of Chicago, it doesn't take me a long time to think of the Manhattan Project and Milton Friedman. When you think of Arizona State, you think of #1 party school in America. So we needed an identity that wasn't that. And our president has decided that identity is going to be sustainability. We're going to be transformational in this market. And that really drives every decision we make. We don't have the same level of difficulty on sustainability goals because we have to be AG Stars Platinum. That's not an option. We have to do it. So when we present it in those terms, we move forward with it. You know, #1 Sierra Cool Schools. That's what we got to do, and he doesn't allow us not to. I think the students would push us there if they had the opportunity, but they're not able to keep up with him as far as his sustainability goals. So we don't have those issues. So it's a lot different than other places. But I think if you can get the administration to latch onto that, it makes life a lot easier. It does not make it smooth sailing at all, because every time there's a bill, he doesn't want to pay it, just like all the rest of your administrations don't want to pay it. But it does help.
Yep.
Well, I'll just say that when our new president came, and now we're going to be pursuing AG Stars. So I'm super excited about that.
Nice.
So the leadership really does matter.
There was a question this morning just talking about marketing and getting it out there. I mean, do you have a hard time saying, look, we've done these successful things, and maybe you can understand that there's light bulbs there. If there's a solar array, people go, wow, look at me, or some kind of splashy thing. But a lot of it's behind the scenes. How do you convey your success stories to the general community and certainly your students?
Well, I'm not, I think that we're not doing as good a job, kind of selling, but we share the different awards, that we get across campus. But also, when students come to campus to visit, or parents come, the students do ask questions. And I think what we do is that we brag about our campus and the idea of sustainability. Going back to the motivation, University of California has very ambitious goals for sustainability, just the system. And so when UC Merced was opened as the 10th campus of the UC system, it was with the idea that it was going to be a sustainable, campus. Again, by this time, sustainability was a thing. Okay, so we started out that way. So it's not about competing with anybody. It is making it who we are. And also by placing the university in the Central Valley, which is an area that is educationally underserved and with health disparities. The idea was also to acknowledge the indigenous peoples that lived in that place and how they manage the land in a sustainable fashion. So that was essentially, and so we keep repeating this when people, come to our campus. But one of the things we're trying to figure out from a marketing standpoint is how to stamp it on our campus that without somebody telling you, you could see it.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, I'm sure you've had great...
I think benchmarking matters. I think it's good you're going for AG Stars. I think that's a good, important, Sierra Cool Schools. We try to get involved and make sure that those things are recognized. Storytelling matters. When you come to the school, we want to talk to that. I think our president's very insightful in that regard. Our newest building is named the Rob and Melania Walton Center for Planetary Health. I mean, it's the corner building as you drive into campus. You can't miss the sign. That's what we're trying to get an acknowledgement of, because it's important that we do that. Though there's a downside to it. I forget what the gentleman's name for the University of Rochester was. I mean, you tout all these things, and then somebody's going to come at you. Yes, we bought our way to carbon neutrality. neutrality. We use RECs and offsets. It happens. A lot of you have done that. It was an acceptable method. Guess what? It's under attack again, and we're going to have to figure it out. And the good news is our president acknowledged that very clearly. He said, I'm glad that we're carbon neutral. Now I want to be 100% renewable out there. So we're working on that as the next phase. It's written in our plan. It's documented. We're moving forward with it, on it. But having those plans posted, what's the next level? Embedded carbon's the next horizon. How are we going to deal with embedded carbon next? And we got to start working on that plan because nobody's going to be comfortable with that we've ever achieved it. It's going to be next. It's going to be next. It's going to be next. Yeah. We have to have that story ready to go.
I think that's a really good point because it is a moving target, and you get almost punished for doing things that are great now, but 4 years from now may not be. Maybe I'll shift it a little bit because local policy, we're based outside of New York City. Local Law 97, for those that aren't familiar with it, is really, there's a benchmarking going on, and now the prospect of fines for having a energy concentration on per square meter that's above what should be the standard for your building type. And so I know that's coming to Chicago. How much does localized policy, on the other side of it, the IRA Act is certainly helping with funding, but are you guys avoiding?
I don't,
well, theoretically, we're going to see.
I have no idea yet.
We don't know
On
yet.
paper, absolutely, it's changed how we price things, but we'll see in practice. It's not there yet. I think a lot of lawyers are going to get a lot of money, but how much does that influence what you do?
I mean, so far it really doesn't. I mean, back in 2013, the city of Chicago required us to, through Portfolio Manager, publish any building over 50,000 square feet. You had to actually do that, and it was publicly disclosed what your EUI was, and then you actually have to post signs in your buildings, and that was kind of a big thing. We had to run that up the flagpole and make sure it wasn't surprising anybody, and then
That was it.
that was it. No big deal. It's just disclosed. So the other thing that happened was kind of similarly, the students were really, we're at a very geeky school where the students were like way, super interested in data, and we hadn't really published our energy management information system information. And so with the new president came in and said, just publish it, put up. So if you go to our website, it's public, you can see every single building's energy use dashboard. And it's been great. I mean, there's nothing to hide. Nobody's pretending it's perfect.
Yep.
So far we haven't gotten threats of fines though.
Good.
So.
Good. Financing, how do you guys think of that? I guess, public schools, private schools, where do you find that money? Dan, where do you find that money?
We haven't yet.
Well, financing is kind of hard, but the University of California has really supported, the campus, and we have some flexibility in how to use certain funds. So, like recently, we're getting about 31.5 million every year for the next 3 years. And it started out as infrastructure funding. Now it's sort of called campus expansion. But there is some latitude that we have. And so part of that funding will help us. And then they give us money for planning towards decarbonization. And so different UC campuses get anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million just for planning how you get there. And UC Merced got $500,000 because they think that we're further ahead of where they want everybody else to be. So we do get support. And unlike some of the older universities or people who have a lot of money in endowment, all our money is mostly, through the state.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how we'll fund it. Now, if we have a new building, that is a different thing because it's planned into it.
And are you able to actually pay a premium? I mean, it's because it's so written into your
I
DNA?
think there's kind of three ways to do it right now. I mean, one of it is what we talked about earlier. You have a return, and you finance it through your operation funds, and you pay it back over time. Two, you pay a premium, and you take on the debt, and then that goes usually through student fees and tuition is how you're going to pay down that debt. And the third thing is through a partnership. If you can find a partnership, a partner out there, a lot of our sustainability initiatives, not necessarily energy related, go through our Starbucks partnership. We have a huge partnership with Starbucks, and they do fund a big chunk of some of the sustainability initiatives on the university. About a third of our online students are baristas right now, and it's a very positive experience with that organization. And there are other ones out there. Coke has shown some definite interest in working with us on some of our zero waste initiatives as we move forward. But at the end of the day, the really big ones, you got to be willing to take on the debt.
Well, we're talking about schools and learning and experimentation. Do you guys have any examples of cutting edge technologies that you've tried? Right? Everybody does lighting. It's kind of a commodity now, solar. Have you said, look, we're going to go out on a limb here and we're going to kind of be that experiment? And how did it work, if so?
I have sort of an outlier response to that. Labs are so energy intensive, and so one of the things we've really been experimenting with is behavioral change, because the fume hood. So if you can get past the safety concerns with the Office of Research Safety and actually just do what's needed to keep things, of course, safe but more energy effective, then there's the whole problem with people just leaving the hoods open all the time, and that's just ridiculous. And so we've been actually working with students to figure out ways to develop competitions and things to keep people remembering to shut the sash. So that's been quite effective. And more impactful, especially one of our buildings, it was the most energy intensive building on campus. Lab, it was facing a lot of kind of operational issues for the labs. And by having the equipment loads being less on the system, it really helped make sure that they ran smoothly, which is on my campus a super important thing. So not exactly what you were talking about, but still kind of impactful, and behavioral change is super important because all of us need to be
theoretically
part of the
not too
solution.
expensive.
Yeah, not too expensive.
I got 3 boys at home you can talk to. So let's talk for a second about your the entire loop for your system, right? That Reuters article that was referenced this morning is talking about, incremental versus really not radical change, but deep changes. And so it's kind of obvious that if you don't have enough cash, you're not going to just decide to dig up your entire campus. But how do you plan for that? Is that, again, an end of useful life? How do you make these big changes that would satisfy, what looked like somewhat unfair, because probably universities and colleges are doing more than anything else, but you get painted with that. And not to react to every news story, but how do you really move the ball?
Yeah. We had a very similar experience internally. We have two turbines on campus. They're natural gas, produce about 16.5 megawatts. Absolutely required from our resiliency perspective. If we're going to get to 5 nines, we have to have those turbines. Then when we added the second one, because our research has grown, we started about 30 years ago at 50 million. We're up to a little over 700 million now on campus. As soon as we opened it at the ribbon cutting, the president said, "This is great. When are we getting rid of it?" He's literally thinks in those terms, which makes sustainability a heck of a lot easier. So I think I go back to something I said previously. If you have an aging system that you're going to have to recapitalize, that's your opportunity, and you got to take it right then and there to sell this moving forward. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. I had to write a check for about $10.5 million to do a master plan for this, and had the exact same conversation. I'm looking at you, Pete, right now, because my boss said to me exactly what your boss said to you. So let me get this straight. I give you $10.5 million. You're going to give me a piece of paper, and on that paper, it's going to say I owe you a whole lot more money. And he goes, I feel like I just married you. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, yeah, well, that's awkward, but let's keep going. But the reality, what the selling point is, hey, we don't have a choice here. We are going to lose this system at some point, and when we do, we will not educate students. So let's tie it back to the operational needs of the university, not the sustainable needs of the university. Now, let's talk about how dumb it would be to fulfill these operational needs without taking sustainability into account. And that's a much more textured conversation that progresses that way. If you're going in and you're saying all I want to be is green, you're gonna kind of lose the audience pretty early on. If you're going in and saying, hey, I want to make sure we're operationally viable for the next 50 years, and by the way, wouldn't it be smart to look at some of the sustainability objectives as we move forward? That's an easier sell from my perspective.
Absolutely.
Well, we're doing the same thing. We're just starting where right now we have a utility master plan that's underway. So as we look to expand our capacity, for growth, how do we do it as smart as we can? We need to be a little bit more incremental about it, but we're finally being aspirational for how we can start to plan for converting that steam plant off of natural gas. And so the utility master plan will get us to kind of one level, and then we're going to actually, for the first time, integrate sustainability into an integrated campus master plan. So again, that whole idea of, dealing with the now in a way that helps you to get to, more ambitious goals later, and really working with the Board of Trustees and the President and the Provost at a very high level, getting everybody kind of on the same page. So sustainability is just built into the future direction of the school.
We also initiated the infrastructure master plan, and part of it is about expansion, because we don't have aging infrastructure right now, and also how to electrify the central plant. But we also recognize that we do not have the money to add a second central plant. So our approach is to go the MOP approach, the modular, utility plant. And, we're having those conversations. And there were also some decisions that were made with the distribution system where it was planned as if we got to the end of the line by taking 20-inch line and then reducing it until you get to 8-inch. And so from that point you can't just dig things up and start. But our infrastructure master plan will give us a roadmap for the expansion as we keep having all these new buildings, and actually we're adding new schools and new majors and all that kind of thing. So that is definitely growing our campus.
Really interesting. The planning that's been spoken about a few times today, it's so true. I bought an old house and had young kids and immediately lost my heating, a water heater. And what do? You call up somebody that services that and says, replace it quickly. And so you've just locked yourself into that same technology. Maybe it's a little incrementally more efficient, but there was no plan there, so there was no way to departing from it because it takes too much time and energy. So getting in front of it's just absolutely crucial. Maybe shifting gears a little bit, tell me, give us some examples of things that just didn't pan out, what didn't work. I mean, you guys seem to be putting an awful lot of effort into this, but they're all not wins, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would say one of the bigger challenges that we're all going to face, that maybe is not an exact answer to your question, but I think it's applicable to this group. We're all going P3, right? Who isn't doing P3 housing right now? Somebody's not, but most of us are. What the challenge there is you've got sustainability goals. Your fence line is your fence line, and you're building these on your campuses, and it's anywhere from 5 to 10 times more expensive to put electric over natural gas in, and you're trying to make these P3s pencil out, especially in this market right now with what construction costs are doing. How do you convince them to keep with the electrification and the sustainability goals? How do you keep them on board with that plan? It is not an easy conversation to have. And quite frankly, at some point, my boss, we don't have a CEO, well, we just hired a COO, but I work for the CFO. He's like, hey, I got to get this to pencil. We can't apply the sustainability goals here. And I'm like, okay, that's a real identity issue that I've talked about 5 times while I've been sitting up here. But he's never said it out loud, but we're just going to blame the P3, and that's his fault. That's not our fault that he did this. But I don't know how we're going to make those two things work right now. We're experiencing inflation north of 15% in construction right now in Phoenix. So to keep rents low and to keep revenues fixed and to ask for sustainability in it has become too hard an ask at this point. So we're struggling with that.
Yeah.
That's actually great point, because the last 1.3 million square feet we added on our campus was by a P3. And so that 1.3 million square feet in what we call the 2020 project has all kinds of issues because of that. So in the end, it became about contract more than everything else. Now, we maintained, the campus maintained its sustainability goals, but there were also some things that they just simply couldn't do. And now we're doing a lot of conversations with lawyers and claims and all those kinds of things, because again, the developer, has different ways of looking at things. So from a sustainability standpoint, anybody who is doing a P3 will have to pay attention to what your standards are, and those standards are written into it. But when the standards are written into it, you may not be able to afford it.
No.
Because essentially what happened was the university needed to grow a lot. And the idea was, this is the only way that we can add that much square foot in a hurry. And if we waited for the state to fund things as they fund, well, we wouldn't have the 14 new buildings that we had as part of that 2020. So it becomes, trade-offs.
Well, I think all of our projects are coming in a whole lot more expensive, not just the P3s. So we're a little bit, we've always built all of our own stuff ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have a strong emphasis on science development. So those buildings are super expensive. So we have a few of those coming along. But so I think we also had an agenda where we needed to create more undergraduate housing in order to have more of our student body on campus. So I think that we really held our nose and we did our first P3 on our campus for undergraduate housing, not sort of off campus. And so I'm going to be hopeful because maybe the timing won't be now. Maybe things will settle out a little bit. But I think, as we get more and more serious about looking at the big expensive project that's the elephant in the room, maybe we'll finally, think about a P3 because, to date, the size of the kinds of energy conservation measures, even if they're more expensive, we can still fund those, but I don't see how we're going to fund the big one. So we'll have to maybe figure that out when it becomes urgent.
Shifting gears a little bit, just humans are not great about assessing risk, and everybody talks about campuses, depending where you are, there's different risks, but climate change has brought on more floods, more wildfire possibilities. Have you had to address that in your campuses, and how do you price in resiliency? Because that may or may not be necessary. It's not like this dorm needs a new heater. How do you think about that? Because it is a risk out there that if you fail to acknowledge, you could be on the losing end of it, but it costs money to put it in.
So far hasn't been an issue for us, although, more intense storm events and stormwater management is something that's definitely coming along in the city. But so far that hasn't been an issue. But as we do our master plan for the next 20 years, that's absolutely going to be something
It changes what you have to put in there.
What do you do? I mean, a 50-year storm, it translates into a 2% chance it's going to happen, and now it's 15% likely that event's going to happen. So we've always been backwards looking for historic averages, and they don't apply anymore. So I think we're all going through that, and if anybody's got a great answer, I've got a consulting fee for you out in the hallway, and let's start talking about it, because I don't have an answer to that. I am very concerned about that. The good news about Phoenix is, we get rain once a year and we have to deal with it, but the temperatures are going up, which is forcing the grid to have a really challenged respect to it. And oh, by the way, everybody's moving in and asking for more of the grid. We expect our peak to double in the next 10 years on our grid in Phoenix. So we're really concerned about that. And by the way, I want to get rid of 16 megawatts of generation on campus and go back to the grid. So it's a really complicated question to ask, and I won't lie to you and say I have an answer to it.
Dan, any insights there?
No, it's something we struggle with and sort of be mindful, and it's more from perspective of how do we respond to some of those kinds of risk. Of course, being in California, there's always the risk of wildfire,
Heat events.
And so we pay extra money, for CAL FIRE, to service us, to respond, to our campus. In terms of rain, it doesn't rain a whole lot, but then what we've noticed in the past few years is that the temperatures are, high and longer, it's hot for a longer period of time. And so this particular summer, we came very close to not being able to supply cooling to a number of buildings. And so we'll shut things off, when nobody is on campus and on the weekends and so on, so that we can, and to the point where the cooling towers were no longer working because, the water, had reached a certain temperature through that circulation. And so part of our expansion of our capacity is to give ourselves a little bit of room.
Yeah, it's not only on the individual campus, but it's on the grid in which you find your location.
Exactly.
It's kind of a double-edged sword there. So when you started your journey, and it sounds like ASU was a long time ago, how did you start assessing it? There's so many buildings. There's so much you probably don't know. What's the first step for anybody who's kind of going through that journey now that you would suggest? Not that most people in this room are starting that journey for the first time, but there's got to be learnings because you seem ahead of the curve.
Well, I don't know. If we're ahead of the curve, I would say that it starts with standards, right? You have to pick a standard, and then your capital programs have to grow from there, and then your renovations have to happen there. If you're going to try to attack it all at once, you're going to lose. I think having a good plan that you can diverge from, and having a good culture that's focused on it are all important things. So I would start working with, are your design standards, are your design guidelines tied to your sustainability goals? Are they there? And if not, get on them right now and start moving forward. You got to steal his CAL FIRE, you got to build that fire break, and you got to move forward. Some of those EUIs are never going to get any better. We have plenty of dogs on ASU's campus right now that we're just going to wait for end of life, and then we're going to move on from them. And then the central side is what is your philosophy? Is it all electric, okay, then we have to apply that. I still get requests of, can we waive this and put a gas boiler in there? And the answer is always no. We're not doing that. We're going all electric. Well, that's going to add a new feeder and this cost to it. Okay. And then the CFO and I sit down and we duke it out for 10 minutes, and he finally, okay, this is our standard, I agree, let's move forward. But it really starts at that standards level.
Even before the standards level, you have to know your campus's needs. Like, it starts with just understanding the raw data of each of your buildings.
Well, how are you going to build? Are you going to build sustainable, and what are those goals? Are you going to force that issue? And I think you said it, right? We got to get our president, we got to get our provost to say that we agree. We are willing to sacrifice, and this is the hardest conversation to have. Are we willing to sacrifice program for sustainability? And are you willing to have that conversation? And wow, that's a fun conversation to have, right? Nobody wants to talk about, well, I'm going to lose a classroom because you want an electric boiler. Well, no, it's not because I want an electric boiler. It's because I want to be HG Stars Platinum. I want to be the most sustainable university in America. That's why I want the electric boiler. It has nothing to do with classroom versus electric boiler. It's classroom versus who are we?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good problem to have. If you ask me.
Yeah.
That you're even able to have those kinds of conversations, I think.
And I agree with the points Alex had made, and I just want to add that I think that as a campus, and all campuses, we invest a lot of money, and oftentimes there is this dichotomy of sustainability versus something else. And I come at it from the approach that we just need to view the investments that we make through the lens of sustainability. Because you're gonna build new buildings, you're gonna do different things and so on. And so if that becomes the lens through we view it, then we're not saying, as I always heard from people, well, we're not investing in sustainability, as if it should be something totally different and apart from itself, as opposed to a culture, the way in which we do the things that we will do anyway. Yep. And the monies that we will spend. And I'd say that in all of that, I think Alex said that at the beginning at some point, data is important. Gathering information and knowing exactly where we are so that we can make a clear plan as to what direction we need to go. It's important. One key area of that is space. And oftentimes I hear that we don't have enough space, and people keep. And then I'm asking my campus, let's make investment, because I did it before and found that it's not like we don't have a space. Our space use is not aligned properly. And so if we keep leasing spaces and expanding our footprint, but we're not using what we have efficiently, then of course we get to this, is it this or is it that? So I think space is, in my mind, a sustainability question.
Oh, it totally is. And that's where your embodied carbon is, because you've already made that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you used embodied carbon to make a space argument, all of a sudden it starts to have a much more different conversation to have, and I think that's where we're going to end up going, because I think we're all resistant to remote work. I think we're all resistant to hybrid work. That's not the way we did it, and we're all managers that needed to have that face-to-face conversation. But once the embodied carbon conversation starts happening on space, I think we're going to start to see some of those barriers come down.
Yeah, interesting.
But I think that, can I just say that the standards too, so I'm excited about our new science building. We actually worked with our students through our Campus as a Lab project, that they looked at all of our LEED certified buildings, and they saw that from an energy use standpoint, they weren't lower energy than non-LEED certified buildings. And so in our new building, we set a target of LEED Gold, but we also set individual targets for, ASHRAE targets and, targets for water, so that you could be really clear with what your standards are and what the expectations are. So I think that, that's going to be really important.
We only have a couple minutes left. Two questions I'll leave to you guys. The first is, speaking of looking through a lens, you're coming at it from your particular perspective as running facilities. If you could wave a wand, what would you have your president, how would you want them to look at it? It sounds like you have a particularly good relationship at ASU, but I'm sure there's always things like if he could see it through your eyes, would he be doing it differently? What could they facilitate better to make facilities actually have an easier job?
My relationship is like a hammer to an anvil, and I don't.
Who's who?
He's definitely the hammer. I think the one thing that I think is hard for presidents to understand sometimes. I think they have a very broad picture, but they lose the details sometimes, and that's natural, right? The farther you zoom out, the bigger picture you get, the more detail. How hard it is to execute. He wants us to electrify the fleet, and he cuts every time we give him a number or a date. He wants to cut it by 90%. I want it tomorrow. I want it tomorrow. I want it tomorrow. You're there's not enough vehicles in America for me to electrify this fleet tomorrow. But keeping that alignment going, because there are so many priorities. I say having a program versus sustainability conversation is an important conversation to have. It's great at the executive level, but when we get down to the professor level, man, it still needs to have that discussion. So you're going to have it 7 times. You're not going to have it 1 time. And he needs to understand that that's why things take so long. That's why it's so challenging. I need it constantly reinforced. You can't say it once. You have to say it 7 times to get it to where I want it to be.
To just end, each of you, the next 10 years, what's the most important thing over the next decade in terms of sustainability on campuses? What do you foresee the biggest challenge?
Decarbonization. We're working on pathways to fossil-free UC. And so that's a big challenge. And
Water.
Okay, Alex.
I'm with decarbonization. And then figuring out a plan to how to get there. Because you're not going to, certainly I don't believe that we're going to solve that in 10 years. But at least we would have a plan of how we would get there.
Oh, there's some serious work cut out for you. I can't thank you guys enough. Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much.